I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to the Conversation with Al McFarlane. I'm glad to be here and glad to have you along as well. Today is Friday, and Friday means we're at the Healing Circle. And as always, we're promising a robust conversation, a great time. Before I begin, I want to thank our sponsor for today's program and for a number of our engagements, and that is the Build Wealth and 9,000 Equities program. Build Wealth and 9,000 Equities, helping 9,000 Black families own a home. Information at 9000equities.com. And it's worth your while to check them out. If you're interested in getting a home, becoming a homeowner, this is your path, your partner to help you achieve that goal. Well, also, before I begin, I want to invite everyone to let somebody know that we're live right now. Use your networks, your contacts, your list, and say the conversation with Al McFarlane is going on right now, that you should join. You should also become a subscriber. We're inviting people to connect with us on our YouTube page, Insight News YouTube. Though we're streaming across several platforms, we're streaming on the Insight News YouTube page as well as the Black Press USA YouTube page, streaming on Facebook, on Twitter, and on LinkedIn. And no matter how, well, I guess we're not connecting on Twitter right now, but we will again. But no matter how you connect with us, we appreciate you, appreciate the connection. We want to grow it. And we've crossed the 1,000 subscriber number goal at YouTube. We want to go to 2,000. And you can make it happen by going to YouTube Insight News MN and becoming a subscriber. So with that, I want to say that on Fridays, we call this program the Healing Circle, and the Healing Circle usually, not usually, but always centers around the work and the vision of my colleague and my leader, Dr. Bravada Garrett Akansanya, and our companion, Dr. Oliver Williams. Dr. Williams, Dr. B, how are you all today? Good to see you, as always.
We're happy to be here. I know I am.
Well, let's go with the protocol, and then we'll bring our special guest in today.
Oh, I'm excited about this conversation. Okay, so today what we'll do, as we always do on Fridays, we'll just begin by centering ourselves and taking a nice deep breath, holding it and just letting it go slowly. And noticing as it comes in your stomach and your lungs, and as you exhale, letting go of stress, inhaling hope and healing and connection. Just quiet your spirit. Now take a moment, as you will, to notice the chair beneath you that is supporting you. You may open your eyes and look to your left. Look in your center, look to your right. Look behind you and notice that you are safe. And once again, resume by breathing in and letting it go. Now we begin in this circle, this sacred space where there is no beginning or end. That's why we, as an African people, we meet in circle so that there is no hierarchy and all the power is shared and everyone has equal access to voice, which is the center of the circle. When we sit in this circle, we honor and remember our elders, because those are the shoulders we stand on. Because somebody hoped our way, prayed our way, worked our way into existence. And we sit here, the embodiment of centuries of dreams. And as we honor the elders, we have to honor our ancestors, because those were the shoulders our elders stood on. And those shoulders for generations have defined and redefined and healed us. As we honor our ancestors, we honor them because they are closest to the Creator. So as we sit here today, honoring our elders, honoring our ancestors, knowing that all life begins, ends in a circular recircling process. We honor this moment, the, the honor of the presence of now. And we invite everyone to know that you're here. In the circle, we use a talking stick. So even though we're not connected physically, spiritually, we have a virtual talking stick and it is passed from one to another in an orderly fashion as African people do. But if the spirit moves and you need that talking stick, all you do is ask and it will be relinquished to you so that you can bring voice and spirit to this space. So, welcome everyone to the Healing Circle. And I pass the talking stick back to Baba F. Here you
And
go.
I take that, Dr. B. Let me pass it straight to Dr. Oliver. Dr. Oliver, always good to see you. And beginning thoughts, impressions, feelings, observations. What's on your mind?
Well, I guess the thing that I think about is us making connections with one another, particularly in the fall coming. And one of the things that I realize is that there are certain things that I grew up with that I think we grew up with regard to noticing the significance of people that were in our community and in our churches and in our neighborhoods. And there are things that we learned to rely on when we were growing up that I think helped us to survive. And I think with young people these days, I think some of them are connected to those things, and I think some of them are not. And so I think we need to reassert ourselves in the process of going forward to understand those things that helped us to survive as a people. So that's what was on my mind today. So with that, I pass it back to you, Brother Al.
Thank you, Dr. Oliver. Well, let me do this, introduce the person I'm going to bring in who's going to be the center of our conversation today. She's a dear friend, a person that everybody knows and everybody loves and respects in this market, and I think probably around the world where she's been and connected and served and supported and taught and engaged people. I'm talking about Robyne Robinson. Robyne has had a commanding presence in the Minnesota arts community as an entrepreneur, advocate, journalist, designer, and consultant. During her tenure as the art director and the 5x5 consultant at the Minneapolis St. Paul International Airport, Minnesota received more than $5 million in art commissions for performances, displays, and art installations created by Minnesota and Upper Midwest artists. Her curation work in public performance and visual arts garnered praise from the New York Times, from Forecast Public Art, and from international travel bloggers who in 2017 proclaimed MSP Terminal 2 as one of the 12 most beautiful terminals in the world. And that because of her focus on promoting local and regional artists. Robyne created an Emmy-winning platform for Minnesota arts during her years as a TV news anchor and reporter, and garnered and her work garnered interest from news outlets like the BBC and Variety. She also made financial education and business development in the arts as one of her key initiatives. And she was, as a 2010 candidate for lieutenant governor of Minnesota, Robyne owned and curated Flatland, which was an award-winning contemporary art gallery featured in esteemed art publications such as Art News and Juxtapose. She also created Exhibit, which is a curatorial collaborative that also sponsored microloans to artists. She served on numerous art boards during, including the Walker Art Center and the Minneapolis College of Art and Design, the Minnesota Museum of American Art, where she served as board chair. She's also been a University of Minnesota Hubert Humphrey Public Policy Fellow and traveled to New Zealand and Australia with the Humphrey Institute to participate in national talks on reparations to the indigenous people of both countries. That was Dr. Sam Myers, a great initiative. Uh, Robin has been a respected jewelry designer for more than a decade. Her Rocks jewelry line is sold by shopping networks, major department stores, and museums such as the Studio Museum in Harlem, the Plains Art Museum, the Lewis Museum of Maryland, the Walker, and the Minneapolis Institute of Arts. She's also a freelance writer for Artful Living and Art of the West magazines. Robin, you got it going on. You always have. So good to see you. Welcome to the conversation.
And I'm only 21 years old. Isn't that amazing?
That's phenomenal. Well,
Hi, everyone.
I'm gonna pass the talking stick to you just to take it from there and start saying what's on your mind, what's on your heart at this moment. I've got some questions, but we're gonna have a family conversation here, so I'm passing the talking stick to you, Robin.
I have to say that Dr. Akinsanya, she made me feel like I'm talking to family today. So I'm just absolutely thrilled and blessed to be here with you all. And it's good to be back in Minneapolis, even if it's for a short time, because it recharges my soul. So much has happened in the Twin Cities for me in my career, but there's always something that is powerful about the Twin Cities, because I think people sometimes forget that much of the creative spirit that is seen in many of the companies around the country incubated in Minnesota. And so you always have this bubble up of creativity. I've been like running from person to person and place to place, and there's nothing but ideas about this city and how to make this city even more exciting than what it has been over decades that I have been here. So I'm just thrilled to be back, Al, and I'm just so glad to see you, Grandpa. Congratulations.
Yes. Thank you. Well, talk about the Coliseum. You've got a press release out recently talking about public art as the key to 5x5's transformation of the historic Coliseum building. Let's go into that. Let's explain it. Lay it out.
For those who are from the Twin Cities, they know that the summer of 2020 was a very explosive time in the Twin Cities with the death of George Floyd and the subsequent protests that happened after. Some turned violent, and unfortunately, one of the main areas that was hit was the business district of the Longfellow neighborhood. The Longfellow has an extensive history in politics and the retail and finance areas of Minneapolis. And so when that area was hit, a lot of long-standing buildings in the community were destroyed, some of them century-old buildings. The good thing about the Coliseum building is that the Lake Street Council had the presence of mind in 2005 to reinforce the building and really give it steel bones. So when some of the buildings went up in flames, the Coliseum survived. And it was through amazing people who had the foresight at redesign, a community organization that was active in redevelopment of properties, saw the opportunity to save this building. And it was through a consortium of women developers and business owners that really brought this building back to life. And so all praises have to go to the architects, Alicia Belton, Janice Dowling, another consultant, Taylor Smaradkova of Redesign, and Chris and Chanel Montana of Denord Spirits. They brought the building back to life, and they brought me on the project because they had the vision to see that they wanted the community to know that there was someone who still cared after the fire, that there was hope coming back to the community, to reinforce the resilience that this community has always had and the history of it. I don't think people really know that Lake Street was a corridor for the Lakota people to get to the Mississippi River to do trade at Fort Snelling. So from there, when white settlers moved into the community and then developed that section of Southeast Minneapolis, it became a manufacturing area. It was right across the river from the Ford plant. And so a lot of World War II mechanics went on in that corridor, and it developed families, it developed retail, it became a very powerful part of the city. And it wasn't the first time there have been protests and actually violence that happened, because there are a lot of machinists union strikes in that part of town. So they brought me in to try to really kind of ideate and think about how we could include art in the process of letting people know that this was community over corporation. This wasn't going to be a carpetbagging situation where outsiders came in, that this was going to be homegrown. And I think at the time, people know that this was during COVID. And so I don't think that many cities had the resources or really the vision in a really extraordinary, unexplored time as to what to do for communities. And so many of the communities had to rely on themselves. And so money that was coming into community came from artists who had grant money, but a lot of venues were closed. They could not perform. So they took that money and put it back in their communities, doing mindfulness, yoga in the streets, painting Black Lives Matter signs in the streets. All of that, the murals, all of that gave people the hope and idea that they were a people that were committed to seeing the future. And so I took those ideas and we worked with graphic designers of color in the community that lived in Longfellow or worked in Longfellow or from the Twin Cities. We worked with True Art Speaks and Tish Jones and poets in the community like Seymour Perspectives, Isha Kamara. We took the history from the Minnesota Historical Society, gave that to the artists and the graphic designers and let them fabricate, let them ideate. And so we had poetry, we had the words to tell people that we cared, that we're there, that we believe in your resilience. And then we had the images that really inspired people. And we took all that, and thanks to sponsors like 3M, we put that on material that allowed the building to heal. So people, if their windows got broken, it wouldn't collapse into the building. It would keep the windows in place until the whole pane could be replaced. And so we wrapped an 82,000 square foot building in a banner like a bandage. And so it gave the building time to heal, and it gave the community, as they drove through that corridor, as they walked through that corridor, as they lived in that corridor, the words and inspiration to let them know that help was on the way, that we're healing, and that we're here with you. And
do we have pictures of that to show? Or if we don't, maybe you could send them over to Cooper.
I will definitely make sure that Cooper gets them.
Okay.
But, you know, I'm so pleased that Al, you know, a lot of times people, when they don't feel that they have a voice, that's when you see destruction. And this mural was never touched around the whole building. Since then, we moved on to phase 2, and we had Kata Golan with Kata Creative install murals on the exterior of the building, and there will be on the interior, but it's a mural that's called As We Rise, We Lift. And we wanted to instill that message to people that this neighborhood is coming back and is being supported. And so on the exterior, all the way around the building, you have messages of hope, you have messages of history. And we also worked with Save the Boards, and were able to have them donate several of the protest boards from the riots as inspiration for people who visit the building and a sense of history. So the whole idea is to make it a beacon of what I consider the 21st century civil rights movement. It is the epicenter of that. And it also provides emotional equity. And that's important to me. Emotional equity means when everybody does emotional equity, we all do it. It's like, that's my church, that's my school, that's my hangout where I used to be in high school. We sit and smoke cigarettes on the benches over there. Everybody has a connection to that fabric that gives them a sense of identity, a space that they feel safe and wanted in, a place where they feel that they are their most creative and at their best. And so emotional equity is the big tie in everything that I do in public art and everything that is in public art, because we want people to always know that it's tied into the community. It's there for you. You are a part of it. And trying to get people to participate in the process to create public art gives people the opportunity, if they have nieces, nephews, children, friends, they can walk down the street and point to and say, I helped with that. I help make my community better. And that's why I am always in a public service role. I was raised by an activist and an alderman in Chicago, and they always say you give back, you make sure that your community is fed. And so whether it is TV news or public art, this is the role that I feel that best serves the community that served me.
That's awesome. You know, I love that you begin with sort of remembering and acknowledging the presence and the equity, the ownership of the land, the stewardship of the land by indigenous native communities. And you refreshed in my mind, at least I'm going to ask you to go back into it a little bit, that the Lake Street was a trail. And
Right.
as you said that, you said it went to the river, but actually it starts over at what's now Bidet
McCoska.
Bidet McCoska,
Yeah.
which was called Calhoun Lake for a number of years. And so the thought that Lake Street itself begins at Bidet McCoska and goes to the river, and that simply is an acknowledgement of a historic, movement of the people that's natural and organic,
Yeah.
and to recognize that that's what Lake Street, the name, was implanted on top of, is important. Talk about that connection with the native and the question of equity and ownership by the stewards of the land, the native communities.
Yeah, I've been doing a lot of writing in the last couple of years for like Art News and talking about the Native American Renaissance that we are undergoing. And I talked to several people in the community in New Mexico, and they say, it's no coincidence as the world is falling apart that the Native community is rising again, because they've never stopped their path. Their path has been straight. While chaos may be all around, their path has been straight, whether it's been a healthy path that supported them or not, they stayed the path. And so now we're starting to hear more stories about what the native contributions have been, not only to the land, but to the community. And so in doing research with Forecast and with the Minnesota Historical Society, most people did not know that at one time there was a pamphlet that you could pick up on the street and told you all about Lake Street's history. But I'm sure the resources are difficult to maintain that. But I took a lot of that research and really just kind of followed the Lake Street path and just saw the bounty of resources that the Native American community saw as they utilized the river and utilized land to get to Fort Snelling. But it's also been there for centuries as a place of encampment and place of recreation, a place of prayer, and a place of religious spirit. And it's just been exploited over the years, and we didn't know about it. But I thought it was important for people to know that there have always been people here on Lake Street that have been doing things. And it's not new, but it's a new version of what we've been doing to add to the creativity of Lake Street. And I think if you've been here long enough, the evolution of Lake Street, that there were a lot of Norwegian families and German families that are along Lake Street. Then African American families moved in. Then Hispanic families moved in. Now it's a melting pot of Native American community, Hispanic families, Asian families, Black families, and it's taken off and exploded. And I give a lot of credit to the Hispanic community right around the lake in Chicago area and the Mercados. And, if you spend any time in the Southwest, you get to see how art is a very important part of the culture there. It's a very vibrant culture, and it's constantly telling stories. I think people that are very close to the center of their culture, and we don't have a lot of money, we find ways to create the beauty around us. And you see a lot of that has transplanted from the southern states, from south of the border to north and Minnesota. And I think that's added to the beauty and bounty of Lake Street. I think what happened after George Floyd is really important for people to pay attention to, because the explosion of art came from the fact that people were trying to rebuild. People were trying to get the message out that we are here.
Mhm.
And I am not trying to blame anybody, but cities kind of lost that vision during COVID. So people were forced to fend for themselves. And this explosion of art is part of it. What has happened since is that now it's become a very important part of public art. People travel to the Twin Cities to see the murals. They want to go to where they can see the George Floyd mural painted by Peyton Scott Russell. They want to be able to see the beautiful murals that are on Lake Street that are created in the Hispanic communities near the Mercados. They are starting to see burgeoning folk art from the Somali community, which is amazing. So I think now the city is starting to realize, oh, public art, this is great for travel and tourism. This, it's great, but it's still not accepted as a public art form by many cities. It's temporary art, and I think some people commoditize it because they think it's a quick fix. But public art is a very important part of every community's culture. And I think what we're seeing on Lake Street, from the west end to the east end of Lake Street, is really a renaissance in people power, because it's the public's decision what public art is, not administrators. Administrators can advise and listen and help participate, but that's really not our role to tell people where public art should be. We are tearing down statues because we don't want to tell people what public art should be. So we need to listen more to people to hear what they think public art is, embrace what is new public art to people, and really listen to the fact that public art is all about communication. That's really the most important to me as a journalist and an art supporter. Murals are the 21st century form of communication for most people, as we have a global movement of people and people are moving to many different places. Public art can tell you the message of what is happening in that community without you having to know the language. And it can gives you the opportunity to decide if you're going to participate and help and be a part of. And so that's why I'm constantly talking about the preservation, the importance, the meaning of public art and its emotional equity. It's really important for us to have representation. It's important for us to be able to have our own voice. It's important for it to be seen as a financial commodity that pays the community back. And so that's why I think what's happening along Lake Street is really important right now. And I think that they just have started a huge festival that's going to be coming up this weekend. It's a mural festival that stretches for miles, and you can take a map and just follow along and go see the murals you want and take selfies in front of it. People are starting to understand the power of art. And I'm hoping that our city leaders are starting to see the power of Lake Street.
Robyne, your story and analysis are spot on and both phenomenal and enlightening, illuminating. As you were speaking, the thought that came to my mind was that you described the pivotal moment of what's the right word for it, of transformation that occurred both in the city and in the country, that occurred in individuals' lives and in the culture. And the symbolic of that is the event of the murder of George Floyd and the things that followed in terms of the community bringing voice of discontent, of anger, of angst, but also in the process, as you've described it, voicing those feelings through creativity, through resilience, and the art and the outpouring of art reflects that commitment to the sense of knowledge of the regenerative process, right?
Yeah.
The regenerative process that really is at the core of existence and of life itself. And so what the words that came to my mind as you were speaking, Robyne, was that in this span of time, the community, here's words I take from Greg Carr, Professor Dr. Greg Carr from the Africana Studies Department at Howard University. There's been a jailbreak. We have broken out
Yeah.
of the strictures of a perspective that is probably described as patriarchic or patriarchal, and we've allowed ourselves to examine other modalities, other ways of assembling the world. And for us as people of African descent, an Africana way of knowing is one that, again, is based on an understanding of the principle of life itself, of regeneration, and of infinity and its presence in every moment. And that presence is bigger than the narrowing, strictured descriptions of reality that might have been present in what was called art and culture before, that was exclusive in its origin and extractive and exploiting, what's the right word for that? Cultural appropriation, right? Of our life story, our life experience, our cultural expression, without the recognition of our ability and our desire and the need for our authenticity and engagement to be at the center of the art life itself. Well, I can go on and on and on, but I'm throwing that back at you just to react to the words, the concept, the visualization that I'm getting in response to what you've said. What do you think?
I absolutely agree. And you're seeing it in so many different ways. I think the first time you started to see it is when the newscast started showing sculptures being pulled down. And that is a symptom that most people don't know, that a lot of these statues that you see, these Confederate soldiers, were instituted by the Daughters of the American Revolution. They had money, they put them in the community, but people don't realize that they were put in our communities to send a message of fear and intimidation. And as the years go by and that history is lost, people just walk by a statue and they don't see it, they don't recognize it, they don't know why it's there, they can't tell you why it's there. But when you don't have power and you don't have money, you can't set the narrative. And so oftentimes these statues were put into our communities without us asking. When George Floyd's death hit with so many people, they saw it as a rallying cry. And so that was just one form. But you're also starting to see young writers like Seti Cook, who wrote this amazing book on hip hop architecture. And he talks about the fact that, again, these structures were put in our neighborhoods. We didn't ask for these boxes. That's not how we operate. And so we need to take what has been put in our neighborhood and reinterpret it with music and color and vibrancy. And that's who we, and the creative culture. And so you're seeing this jailbreak happening around the world. When we did our town hall 5x5, we did a town hall right after George Floyd's death, because we recognized that, surprisingly, the uprising after George Floyd's death happened 60 years to the Detroit riots and the creation of the Afro-Cobra movement, the Black Arts movement, and Leroy Jones and so many of the great Black artists. And so I wanted to take that opportunity to talk about where are we now. And it was just a resounding response, because we had 500 people from Brazil tune into this, who is really undergoing their African Renaissance and understanding who they are as Africans in the diaspora. So it's been powerful to see us reclaiming our power, reclaiming our voice, reclaiming our time, as Sister in Congress told us. We're reclaiming our time, we're reclaiming our time. And we are seeing people of different ethnic cultures, different races, saying, now is our time to have our voices heard. I get to work with amazing people in the community like Luis Fitch, who has a beautiful show of Mexican history, an anthology of Mexican art that's happening at Artistry Minnesota in Bloomington, Minnesota right now at the Inez Greenberg Gallery. And again, this is a story of somebody reclaiming their own power. A young man who came from nothing in Tijuana, who helped his mother sell dresses out the back of a car, taught himself graphic design, taught himself PR, taught himself how to market, and taught it to his mother, and then went into the community and showed people his artwork, and people gave him an opportunity. He parlayed that into working for General Mills, and all these companies, created the first Hispanic branding company in the United States, in Minnesota, on Lake Street, in a second floor walk-up, and now is winning accolades from the Mexican government. His work is shown all over the world. He created this amazing anthology about Mexican art and what it really means and how it's infiltrated the public consciousness. And that's another form of breaking down the jail. You know, he just went in there and just blew up the jail and went inside and took it over, you know? And so I'm just really, I'm pleased that people are recognizing that this is an opportunity for us for break our minds free from what has been in the past and told this is what you must accept. No, we don't accept that anymore.
Okay, so now I'm burning up. I don't even know how to say. I'm so excited to hear you talking about this. You know what hit me as you were talking? You are still the most excellent storyteller.
Thank you.
I mean, that has just been such an enormous gift to hear the story through your eyes, through your voice, the intonations, even the turn of your head. It is so powerful to sit with you and hear that narrative of how we came to be and where we're. I'm almost to tears. It's powerful.
I kind of get caught up, Bravada. I just get caught up, and I just, it just starts coming out because I just honestly feel so passionate, not about what I do, but about this community and the wealth and breadth of what we have, and sharing the stories and getting to sit in the presence of power, not financial or economic, but the presence of power, our story. It just gets me excited, and I want to share it with other people. So I guess that's the natural journalist.
It's still contagious, honey. I don't know what it is, but I don't want to get rid of that one. It's contagious.
I love this community. I truly do love this community. And I think part of it comes from people that really had passion for my mother and father. I just, I can't say enough about them instilling in me, the importance of community, and that when your time is done, you just make sure your foot is wedged in the door so somebody else can come behind you. And I hope that I have done my part. And I'm going to go have dinner with Sister Georgia Fort in like 3 hours. She is the one I held the door open for, and so we just have all these breadth of stories that need to be keep being told. And if Georgia's going to tell the story, Georgia's going to tell the story. Somebody else is going to come behind Georgia and tell the story. We just have to keep our story alive. In this day and age and culture where we're trying to have our narratives erased completely, we have to keep forcing our way in to tell the story, recreating the narrative so that their story becomes obsolete and passé just by people seeing it around them and being able to determine for themselves and say, that's a false narrative. This is what I see.
I love it. I love it.
I try.
Dr. Oliver, what you think?
Well, as Robin was talking about making connections with different populations, and she's talking about Brazil. I went on the trip with Sam and Gary and part of the university to Brazil, and it was so interesting to me. When we were there, we had people who were on faculty at the U, but grew up that were Brazilian. And we ended up going to see the connections between Africans and Brazilians and Native Americans or Native Brazilians that intermarried. And they intermarried because they were being oppressed. But we also had a chance to hear the story of African slaves that ended up intermarrying with the slave kidnappers and holders. And in hearing the story, it was interesting. I said, so what made them do that? I said they were being altruistic and decided that it was important to let people be free and to have a different vision of the world. They said no, they didn't want to get killed, so they needed to marry in to the African groups in order to be able to be safe. But even hearing that story, they gave the land to the church, and the church divvied up the land because they didn't want to outright give it to the slaves. But they talked about how that was regions of the country that ended up evolving over time, even to today. But it was also interesting seeing that there were protests about the government and how racist the government was being in terms of still trying to oppress people. And then going to, with Sonia in Puerto Rico. And John Leguizamo tried to do this really pretty good thing about looking at the history of Latino populations and also including Africans in the discussion.
Right.
And he went to Puerto Rico, and I saw version, and he didn't do as good a job with Puerto Rico as he could have. There's a Loesa and Santurce that's in Puerto Rico, and telling sort of the history of that, but also looking at Bumba as a legacy of in Puerto Rico that connects to African communities and art and dance. So I was hearing Robyne talk about that. I'm looking at all the different places that I've been, but seeing the connections to identifying self and our collective connection as African people and knowing who it is we are. And even there was a conversation we're going to the Dominican Republic in a couple of weeks and having conversations about identity and being able to see people's identity and African identity in those communities in even different parts of Africa and the different ethnicities, and people getting a chance to see who they are and their connections to who they are is important. Every time I've gone to a different place, what's been able to help me make a connection with them is for me to be able to see myself in the populations that I'm interacting with.
Yeah.
Even in Germany, it was interesting. Jews were killed and tried to be annihilated, but there were Black people during World War II as well in Germany as that oppression was going on. So it helps me when I know my history associated with those different locations.
Most definitely.
And I think that's important to me. The things that Robyn's talking about is, for me, is being able to trace that history of who we've been in the Twin Cities. And I'm also a Detroiter. I grew up in Detroit.
Right on.
And so being able to see some of that and knowing the history of Black people in Detroit has been an interesting thing as well. So
Detroit has such an amazingly rich arts culture, and most people don't really even know that. And I think what they probably know most is the music, because that's the house party central. So they know the musical artists, but the depth of art and the people that were pioneers that made sure that Black arts always stayed alive, like George Namdi, is just remarkable. And thankful that those leaders had the foresight and vision to be able to tell our stories.
Right.
And going back to Brazil, it's just fascinating and such a rich culture. They're going to be part of a world conference, and I believe that you took part with Dr. Myers for the conference that I'm going on with Dr. Myers. This is the 6th World Conference on Racial and Social Inequities around the world. And I understand, Dr. Williams, that the Brazilian conference was so powerful. People are still talking about it. Yeah. They're bringing a delegation to Cape Town, South Africa, where the conference is going to be this year, September 3rd through the 5th, at the University of Western Cape. And they're going to be working with me. We created the first arts delegation that's going to be going to Cape Town, with the Dr. Meyer's Public Policy Conference. And so we are introducing a paper asking the United Nations to amend their protections for journalists in conflict zones to include street artists who are under the same circumstance. And so Peyton Scott Russell, who did the George Floyd mural, will be going with me, and we'll be working with Cape Town artists Mac One and the Hand Control 360 crew to create live murals that we can stream, and hopefully you can get insight in on that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so we'll be live streaming murals while we're at the conference, murals that talk about protections for street artists. We're going to do a panel discussion that will include the UN and all the local artists as well. And then the Brazilian delegation is going to really come and bring it with a huge poetry explosion on the plaza, on the pavilion. I'm very excited. We're going to have Cape Town musicians, Cape Town thought leaders, food trucks to experience all kinds of African food culture. And I'm just really excited that Dr. Myers gave me this opportunity to use the platform to talk about the power of public art and how it gives people a voice, and how we need to protect those people who are out on the street trying to give voice to other people.
That's right.
Well, it was fascinating to me that when we were there, it felt like when I was in undergraduate school and people were protesting, and they were protesting against the university, but they were also protesting against the policies of the then president of Brazil. And I've got some connections in South Africa for you too.
Oh, cool.
But also in Brazil. We're in Espírito Santo.
Yeah, Espírito Santo. Yeah.
Yeah, and so that was lively, to say the least. And the action that they had with the young people, talking about what racism exists in Brazil at that time, it's amazing. So,
I can't wait.
Robin, let me ask you. You mentioned your mom and dad, your parents, and I love to ask people to lift up their lineage, their genealogy. We started by acknowledging the elders, the ancestors, and in that spirit, I want to ask you to talk about your lineage, the parents that have given you so much. Let's learn more about them and your family lineage. Whose shoulders are you standing on?
Al, I got to write this book eventually. I've been slow on it, but I consider myself, a princess of that Talented mentality. My parents really believed in making sure that we knew what was happening in our community, that what we learned from a book was not necessarily what was happening in real time. And so, growing up as a young Black girl in Chicago in the early 70s, with parents that were activists, my father was introduced to politics by my mother. And my mother was a receptionist for Sammy Rayner. If you know anything about Chicago politics, Sammy Rayner was a Tuskegee Airman. And when he came home, he opened up the first Black mortuary on the city's south side. But he was heavily into politics. You did nothing without talking to Mr. Rayner first. And so Black politics on the south side of Chicago incubated there. I remember my parents going to see Fred Hampton's funeral at Mr. Rayner's funeral home. We had the African American Patrolmen's League in our house, talking about what they're going to do to offset Mayor Daley. We had the eventually mayor of Chicago, Eugene Sawyer, was my father's best friend. But we had Oscar Brown Jr. In the house that was doing poetry and talking politics. The most important, I think, part of my family is that my mother's baby sister, Shirley Muhammad, married the son of Elijah Muhammad. So we had the Nation of Islam in our house all the time.
Wow.
And so I got a wealth of education about what was happening in Chicago city politics every day. And so I was the more outspoken of the daughters. And so, teacher would say something was happening. I raised my hand. That's not true. My father told me, la, 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 la. And so, I was always in trouble because I had a different viewpoint. But you know,
Mhm.
what do you expect when my sister went to school with the daughter of Kermit Coleman, who was one of the team for the Chicago Seven during the 1968 Democratic Convention. So yeah, that was my upbringing, and so you know, I wanted to do something always to give back to the community, and my parents just instilled that into me. And when I came to the Twin Cities, it was a time of change. Tysel Nelson had just been murdered. That, you know, that was the culmination of what is really kind of, again, happening in the Twin Cities. But that's where I got my first interviews with a very young Keith Ellison, who was still in college in law school, who was leading the protests against the police at the time. You know, it was a very fertile time. It was Reverend McAfee, you know, and Spike Moss, and they were leading the headlines every night. And then, you know, I'm sitting in the middle of Sharif Willis and all his vice lords, and they're talking to me. And then when Minister Farrakhan comes to town, it's like, yes, you are a little cousin. Come here, come talk to me. So, you know, it was the opportunity to really give voice to my community, to do what my parents taught me to do, to make sure that you keep that foot in the door so that people have a voice. And it was a lot of me in my youth and exuberance trying to be a disruptive cog in the machine, but try to do it with grace. And so that, you know, the man better than the man knows himself. And so that you can paint a face on it that people will actually listen to what you're trying to say. I really think very strongly that the reason that I had strength in the community is because of what my parents taught me. And they taught me that you just don't go into a community and you take their resources and you leave. You become part of the fabric of the community. And so that meant talking to the women's community, Black community, Asian community, gay community, and gaining their support, letting them know that even though I may work for something that may not be trusted, you can trust me to try to get into the machine and make sure this story is told in a proper way.
I think the word fierce also describes you, Robyne. You were known for speaking out and being clear, being unambiguous, right? Straightforward. And
there's a
clear.
difference between fearless and just not recognizing you should be afraid. I think that's really the difference. I never really felt that I should be afraid of anything. It just happened, you know, and I just happened to be honest enough to say it. I remember a couple instances, just as an aside, real quick, to talk about some of our community greats. When I did my first interview with Jimmy Jam, his people are all like, don't talk about his family life. Don't talk about his family life. And the more you tell me not to do something, it's not intentional. I swear it's not intentional. It's just that I am going to ask about it. And the same thing with Prince. People don't talk about this. Well, I'm just going to naturally talk about it. And the funniest thing that happened with Prince, it was one of those, you know, crazy things where he was talking and I lost my train of thought because I kept staring at his feet. And it just blurted out, what size shoe do you wear? But he turned it into an amazing experience. He's like, okay, come here. So he takes me by the hand and we walk through the studio and we go up on the riser, the stage, and he goes, okay, put your foot on the wah pedal. I was like, okay, put my foot on the wah. See, it's too big. It's too big. I put my foot on the pedal. It's the right size. Right side. You know why? Because it's ordained by God. It's ordained by God. Okay, brother, I'm sorry. Okay, you got me. You got me. All right, I'm done. So yeah, you know, sometimes just not having a filter is good.
You mentioned our friend Spike Moss, and pull up the cover of this coming Monday edition of Insight News, Cooper. We were part of the celebration of the renaming of Plymouth Avenue to Spike Moss Way that happened this week.
Wow.
this little report we called Poetic Justice. And the story leads with the idea that, the way was at 1925 Plymouth Avenue. It was
Yes.
destroyed by the city deciding to put the fourth precinct where the way had been. And so we called that a power move, right? Telling, as you said, telling people, what we have to believe, that really is like putting statues up, right? Reinforcing their narrative and their power. And so when this street was renamed and the gathering in front of the fourth precinct, giving the fourth precinct a new address, it's now 1925 Spike Moss Way.
Oh, that's
That,
so funny.
I say, is a power move in response. And it means that we're up, and I called it poetic justice, right? That's what it is.
It is. It
Yeah.
is. It's just amazing how, it all comes full circle. It all comes full circle. And I think you're going to see the same thing with the relocation of the precinct over in Longfellow too. It's going to, it really says something when the community stands up for itself and says, we're reclaiming our power, and this is how we're going to reclaim it, and give a little sting to it too, a little bit. Some of that is kind of fun as well.
Well,
Yeah.
Dr. B, let's focus for the last few minutes here on the process of healing and what healing does, and what art and healing, how art is a companion or a process or a system that allows us to heal. What do you think?
Can we show some of the artwork from the Coliseum building too while we do that?
Sure. Yeah, Cooper, if you got it, just go ahead and run the art, and Dr. B can
Perfect.
talk. Yeah.
Yeah. As we can see, the thing about art, that it pulls on your spirit, because art is the exhibit of the spirit. Even in psychology, we use art as a healing mechanism, as a diagnostic mechanism, because you don't have to have words. You don't have to even be able to label what you put, but your feeling connects to it. And when you see an artist, even when Robyne first designed her jewelry, I had no idea she had that in her. I mean, I knew she was creative and all of that, but I could see that was a sharing, a pouring out of self. And that self isn't just a now self, it's a past self, it's a future self. It's how we connect that circle to all time, right? Because in African culture, time is circular. There is no ending. There is no beginning. It's forever. It's forever. And that's what I see. And that's why it's powerful, because we can always jump in like double dutch and experience the moment with that person who is an artist. That's what is powerful about this story.
And I want to add in, Dr. Akinsanya, it is important for people to remember, while this art is uplifting you and it's giving you comfort, it is giving you inspiration, it is motivating you, the person who created needs the support too. And we often forget that in times of stress, we turn to artists. In times of grief, we turn to artists. And then when it's all resolved, nobody's there to help the artist heal. And that's important for us to remember, that once we find ourselves, we have to turn back to the people who helped us get there and help them heal as well.
And ironically, the same vehicle they use to heal others is often the one they need to heal themselves. So they have to use what's in them and begin to label it, begin to understand just even why I put these lips there. Why did I put this color there? What was I trying to say? Because most artists, they just be. They just be. And the whole process is an acknowledgement and a lifting up of them being. And that's what I like about this whole representation of art, this whole discussion we are having today. It's so exciting, because I don't care who you are, your art is your art. And no matter what you do, there can never be another person who strokes that brush or that pen or stretches that metal or that silver to be what you made it be. It's your connection to the creator, and nobody can ever take that away.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I got so motivated. I'm knocking the camera over.
Well, Robin, it's so good to see you.
Thank you.
Wonderful. It's so wonderful to hear your voice, and just excited about all that you've described that you have done. But I'm equally excited for what you are going to do, the travel, the connecting, the teaching, the telling. So I'm going to take a few extra minutes here to ask you and us to reflect on what it is that we're creating. What's in your mind's eye, 3 years out, 5 years out, 15 years out. And I asked the question, really believing that what is 3, 5, 9 years out is really present right now in you. And it's where you have always been, even from before you were born. What do you think?
Let me start by saying I came to the Twin Cities on a Greyhound bus with no job. And the community supported me because I think Black or white, Asian, Hispanic people, if they can connect with you and know that you mean well, they attach themselves to you and they give back. And so I'm forever grateful to the Twin Cities for what they've given me. So I can't help but give back. What do I want to see in 3, 5, 9 years? Legacy. And not my legacy, but the legacy of what this community is about. And I think it's important for everybody to be able to have a hand in their own legacy. And my legacy is a small part of a greater legacy in this community. But I want people to know that through public art, if they participate, they can walk down the street holding the hand of a grandchild. They can walk next to a husband or wife. They can talk to their future generations and turn around and say, I helped make this. I helped put this in our community. And I believe in our community. And our community goes on.
Ooh.
I think that's a mic drop. Listen.
It is.
Robin, thank you so much, Dr. B,
Thank you.
Dr. Oliver, and all of those who listen, people who left messages in the chat. Thank you all. Cooper, thank you for a great job. I'm Al McFarlane. This is the Healing Circle at the Conversation with Al McFarlane. We'll see you next time. Take care.
Bye-bye.